It's 5 p.m., so we're going to get started. I am keeping an eye, well, welcome to this group conversation for infrastructure. I am keeping an eye on the document, and Sid is the first. He's asking if I can present the OKR highlights on slide 8. Yes, let me just get there real quick. All right, so this quarter, we're actually focusing on an incredible amount of work. The team has matured a lot, so we expect this quarter to be very productive, and we've taken on a significant amount of work, some of it driven by business requirements. The first thing that I put on the list, which is an actual KR for Q2, is Elasticsearch to improve the searchability on GitLab.com, where our first iteration is on a single project. And Mikhail is working on this. The second thing we're working on is on eliminating NFS dependencies because they've caused us grief in the past, and we really shouldn't be using NFS anymore. So we'll be doing work on that as well. We're testing Cloudflare for a WAF. This is something that's been ongoing for a while, but we were waiting for Cloudflare to have some features we had required. That's now happening, so we'll be working on this as well. Snowplow, it's also a long-standing request.
Sorry for interrupting. You're still on the first slide, so you can consider just not sharing the screen so we can see you, or sharing the slide towards which you're talking.
That's interesting. In my screen, I am on the right slide, but I'll stop sharing, and that way you can go look at the slide and you can see me. Anyway, we're also working on deploying Snowplow to track user growth, and also working on repository storage on CFS. We've talked about the importance of data and how we aim to protect it at multiple layers, and this is the first step at addressing that. There's obviously other work that's happening along those lines, but we're very focused on the durability of the data. Camo proxy is also another request that came from security. This one actually, I guess we've known about it for about a month, and there's also work in progress. Vault.
What is Camo proxy? It's something with SSL and images, but I don't understand.
I don't have the details, but I think Anthony can probably speak to it better than I could.
It's the.
Oh. Go ahead, Dan.
Other Anthony. No, go ahead, Anthony.
Go ahead. No, you, please.
The idea here is just that when people upload attachments or links to images inside of comments, that allows the hoster of that image to collect things like IP address and refer. We should be blocked. We should be configured to not send refer, but anyway, it's just to help. So instead of the client browser making those requests, GitLab will do it on their behalf. So the request looks like it comes from GitLab.com instead of the users. It's just a privacy measure for our users.
Thanks.
I'll add that it also prevents mixed content errors since everything will be served via HTTPS.
Awesome. Thank you, Anthony. Also, we'll be working on Vault. Secrets management is super important for us. There is already some Vault usage, but we want to make sure that it's fully productized and that we do fully take advantage of it, especially as we're embarking on Kubernetes. Postgres 11, we're running Postgres 9.4, and there are some features we'd like to take advantage of for data recovery and managing bloat that become much easier, much more doable under Postgres 11. So that's a significant undertaking, given the importance of the database. So there is a lot of testing that's going on to make sure that that goes smoothly. Obviously, cost management, we made a lot of progress last quarter, but now that was sort of a race to make sure that we weren't overspending, but we need to standardize and essentially make that an ongoing process to continue watching cost. And on slide 9, actually, let's see. I think it's slide 10. There are the OKR highlights for the delivery team, and these are also super important and very exciting. We continue to work on the code base merge. We started that last quarter. It's a really complicated problem, but we're making a lot of progress. We want to have a single code base to streamline a lot of the deployment process. We're also dipping our toes with Kubernetes. So we're moving the GitLab.com registry to Kubernetes, and there is a ton of work that's happening there. We decided for this to be the first iteration because it wasn't a core service. And so it allows us to really understand how to operate Kubernetes. We will essentially continue to move through other services like the license server, and eventually we'll end up with the GitLab application itself. And then we're also working on object storage limits and single object storage. This really came about, it's been something that we've been discussing for quite a long time, but it really came about last quarter in terms of managing costs, since we didn't have any limits, and for all intents and purposes, we were sort of an infinite store. So Alessio and Maya are working on this as well to make sure that these are manageable limits. All right, Sid is asking on slide 10, will we speed up after we get to weekly? Look at slide 10. In terms of, yes, we will. The most important thing that we're trying to get done with continuous delivery is speeding up is one aspect of it, because we spend a significant amount of time just going back and forth, solving conflicts. And by the time, there's a lot of lag between the commit and when things land in production. And so there's a lot of context switching cost involved. So this should actually help significantly. It also will also help availability, because as these changes are landing in production, we should have a much smaller problem space to deal with. So yes. Is the self-managed thing a change? It is, in the sense that today, we produce the release candidates, and those are the ones that end up in GitLab.com. But that's no longer happening because the changes are landing on GitLab.com. So what I want to make sure, and what we want to make sure from the delivery team, is that there is awareness that we're not just ignoring what happens to self-manage. So I think the idea is that at the end of this process, which I think Maren said would probably take about 4 weeks to get everything stable, we will make sure that Omnibus is being generated from those changes as opposed to the way that it's being generated today.
Thanks. Can you talk towards where we're roughly spending money? Like, if you don't have data, we can skip this, but I love to just see, is it the server compute? Is it the CI compute? Is it the SSDs for Git? Is it the S3 artifacts? Is it transfer? Is it non-GCP costs? Where are we spending the money?
I don't have specific data right now, but I mean, it's spread all over the place, and we found some places where we are spending more than we should. And what we're trying to figure out right now is, where do we get more bang for the buck? So, for instance, there's been discussions of moving from SSDs to spindles because it is way cheaper, but we don't have a good idea of what the effect on performance, which effect on performance we will take. So we know, for instance, that the database will always stay on SSDs, but the Git repos will likely not. And then once you've made the decision that we're going to start optimizing these sort of layers, then we need to sit down with product and figure out what is the best way to do this in a user-facing fashion without hurting the users. There are other optimizations that we could look at in storage. Hopefully, we will have the operations analyst soon. We had two candidates fall through, but we have a good pipeline, and we will get a much better understanding of where these costs are. We also understand that the CI runner costs are higher than they should be, especially for us. So we're looking into that as well. But I don't have a good breakdown right now for these.
Thanks for that. And my 2 cents is that we probably need functionality in GitLab itself to move repositories around. Like, if they haven't been used for a while, they move to spindles. If they haven't been used for half a year, they move to S3. Yep. And then if you want to access the repo, you first get a rehydration screen for 10 seconds while it's retrieved of S3. So I think the first step would not. It's not like, should we move all the SSDs to spindles? I think it should.
Right.
how much can we save if we move 90% to spindles and 50% to S3 or something like that?
Yes, and actually, John is just making a comment about tier storage in the application, and that is very true. So there is, as I mentioned, there's a ton of work happening on CFS for the repos, and some decisions we're trying to make will enable us to do some of these things with support for the application. In fact, today I just published a blueprint that I believe you had requested on project recovery and how we can speed it up. And the interesting thing about all these problems is that they're interwinted. So there are some solutions that we can use to do multiple of these things. And so we're now trying to put the blueprints together to tie them. But tier storage, reducing the MTTR to recover deleted projects, all these things we think we can solve with some CFS and then some support for the application. Like I said, I just posted a blueprint, and I'll make sure to CC you on the issue so you can see it is on the engineering board.
Yeah, and I also spent 20 minutes last week talking about whether CFS can bring us to tiered storage, and that doesn't seem likely. So although they're intertwined, I do think that that the tiered storage has to happen at the application level.
Oh, it has to.
Yeah. So
there's no question about it.
And that starts, I think, with a business case like, hey, we can save this X amount of money. So if we can just do that calculation, how much are we spending on SSDs, and then assume we can reduce that spend, like how much can we save by moving to spindles, and assume that goes for 90% of the repos, I think that will be a very powerful figure to then prioritize this in product.
Yeah, there was also another issue we opened last week to collect some metrics on the state of repos. How many repos do we have per node? When were they last accessed, et cetera, to get some of that data as well. We can obviously, as you mentioned, start with an assumption of saying, what happens if we offload 90% of this to spindles? And that'll give us some rough calculations. But we are also pursuing collecting more accurate metrics.
Cool. If you have something, please Slack me.
Yes. Kay is asking, we're in the early days of Elasticsearch planning, blueprints.
I can go ahead and.
Sure.
So I was just going to say, yeah, we're in the early days of Elasticsearch planning. I know the blueprints are in draft form still. What does the long-term plan look like, or what are you worried about as we continue to think about how we roll this out to .com? Particularly, do we stay with like a hosted SaaS offering of Elastic, or do we start deploying our own Elasticsearch clusters and hiring our own Elasticsearch engineers to deal with this? Like, what are the things that you're thinking about and worried about as we try and roll out a very large Elasticsearch instance?
Right. So based on estimates that Mikhail did, the hosted is out of the question if we go with GitLab.com at large. So we've started doing that in-house. And then the first iteration is limited to a single project, just for us to be able to gather some data on and be able to extrapolate that and create some sort of predictions as to how big is this going to get and what is it going to take. So the biggest concern is running this huge cluster ourselves at a reasonable cost. So we still have some open recs in infrastructure, and there's been some discussion as to whether we should, we have a good team in terms of SREs and DBRE skills. Should we go find some people that are more specialized on things like Elasticsearch? So that is definitely the consideration, and in some respects is where our planning is going. But my biggest concern is, are we capable of running this huge cluster? Because based on the calculations that Andrew and Mikhail put together, this is going to be very, very large. So that is where the biggest worries are. But we are trying to get ahead of that curve, especially in terms of staffing. Ben is asking, what things from product development do you need help with? What info needs to be product feature priorities? Actually, Jarv wrote a document. This actually, it's been around for a while. Those would be the highest priorities, the ones he outlined in that document. Right now, we're just busy laying foundational stuff for instance, Kubernetes. I know there is work on GitLab HA, which obviously affects, not GitLab HA, sorry, GitLab HA, which obviously affects our availability. So aside from the stuff that Jarv put together, I think this quarter we're just super busy. But we should definitely discuss this as we move into Q3.
Yeah, no, actually, I'm thinking even longer term than that. Like, what can we do over the next 2 years to really drive forward the availability and durability of GitLab?
So from the product engineering side of the house, I'm not sure yet. But from the infrastructure side of the house, one of the things that there was a presentation by Theo Schlossnagel at SRECon titled Shipping Software with an SRE Mindset. And so I think dogfooding is going to be the biggest thing in terms of there's a lot of things that we do that are not in the app today they glue everything together. And those things need to move from the realm of just this is what infrastructure uses to run the application to let's move most of the stuff into the product. It doesn't have to be. It's not that we're going to start developing some of these things in product, but we should find a middle ground between some of the tools we have today and what they look like long-term in the product and start just pushing them and pushing that SRE mindset into the product. I think that's the biggest focus from a sort of a strategic perspective. And I think it makes sense because we're also starting to be very focused on self-managed customers, right? So infrastructure is getting more and more involved with self-managed customers. We've been having conversations with the support organization through Tom and Lyle and other folks to see how we can better help. There's been this idea floating around to have some support folks sort of do short, quote unquote, internships in infrastructure so that they get to see how we do some things in GitLab.com and take that knowledge back and apply it to self-manage. So there's like this wide array of focus points, and I think we just need to pick 2 or 3 that we really get vested in. But my top picks would be this SRE mindset into the application, and then making sure that we are getting better and better at running GitLab. I think we should be the best ones running GitLab on the planet. And I've seen customers doing amazing things. I know we'll get there. And it's great that some of those customers are sharing their own experiences with us because we are actually learning a ton from them. Sid is mentioning that Elasticsearch 2 cents, one index
so maybe in general, you can just have people speak for themselves. I'm sorry for putting in here. But my 2 cents is one index for the entirety of GitLab.com seems very hard and expensive. So maybe we have to do tiered storage or tiered searching so that groups can be on different servers, and we can also have like Elasticsearch servers. Some have more redundancy than others. Like if it's a super popular project, you probably want 3 servers so that you have redundancy. If nobody searched in that project for the last 6 months, you can probably do without some redundancy because an outage has less effect. So I'd love to continue that conversation in that issue.
Okay.
But I've heard a lot of startups that have had a lot of problems with building one big index. It seems almost infeasible, although I think GitHub is doing it, but it must be costing them a lot of time and money.
Yeah, I think in some respects, it's the decision of how these sets of clusters get built is really product driven, right? It depends on where we place the search boundaries to these things, and whether, if you have clusters that are focused on certain projects, then you can just show up to GitLab.com and type a search and hope to find something. So we'll build whatever we need to build to make it cost effective and so that it works. And it's really, we're working with product to understand what is it that we need to build.
Yeah, and I don't think it's a binary thing. For like, if we do this, we can never do an instant-wide search.
Right.
We can do an instant-wide search. It would just cause a read on every single of the servers, and you have to combine results. But it might be that we have a lot more group search volume, and that the read load in the end, not the constraining thing, that it's mostly about storage and write load and index building that is constraining us, and that the reads are an afterthought.
Right. Agreed. More questions, more comments. We still have 5 minutes to go. Okay, I think the one thing that I will highlight is, because this is incredibly exciting, is that continuous delivery is starting tomorrow. And delivery has been working really, really hard to make this happen. And this is going to unblock and unleash a hero voice.
I wanted to interrupt you. It already happened on staging. So we had the first full pipeline deploy go to staging, and we are going to try and push this through Canary tomorrow if all goes well. So fingers crossed.
Even better. Yes. Anyway, congratulations to delivery, because this is huge.
Very
I know
exciting.
it's only 2 letters, but it's huge.
And that's a project I think Maren took on, and I think we were all a bit skeptical whether he can do it in the time frame he said he could do it. And I'm really impressed by the work of the team and the collaboration with infrastructure. This is very exciting.
Just don't look at the code. It's working.
Actually, it's worth noting that based on what I've heard, a lot of this work happened during their fast boot about a month ago, which was amazing. I don't know how I know by the end of the week they were exhausted. And I'm not surprised, because they came back and they said, okay, we're done. It's like, wait, what? So yes, congratulations and thank you. Amazing.
I just want to correct you, Jerry, there a bit if I can. The culmination happened then because we kind of managed to move faster than we would otherwise, right, because we had like a buildup of a lot of information.
No, I know you had a lot of pieces to set before you could put them all together to put the thing together. But
and it's auto DevOps right now. Like, so I just download the GitLab code base, push it to GitLab, and then I get gitlab.com, right? That's all I have to do, and register domain name.
Almost.
I wish.
We'll get there. We'll get there. All right, so we have 3 more minutes, and there are no more comments. Thank you for being here. If you come up with something, just come to the Infrastructure Lounge or hit me up in Slack. I'm happy to answer more questions. Thank you, everyone.